I've been an operator, so I can relate to entrepreneurs on what's it like to run a business. But I also know what the cheat sheet, the answer key is, because I was on the private equity side, so I know what things drive value.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Careers in Finance. Today, I'm joined by a very exciting guest because he's one of my personal friends from way back in the day. I'm not going to say when because I'm not going to date us, but Bob is all the way from high school, and he's had an amazing career in finance. It's very unique in that he started in one position and it kind of like built up to his own venture. And so for budding entrepreneurs out there, I know that having one's own business has become more and more popular these days. I think this is an amazing example of someone to learn from. And so I want to welcome Bob to the show, first of all. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And so I'm just going to open this up right, very, very broad and say, back when we were in high school and we were completing this thing called the IB program, did you have a nice idea of what you wanted to do in your career? Did you know that you wanted to go into a business program and like go get your accounting designation or like all of these types of things? Did you have that ready from the very beginning?
Yeah, back in high school, man, that was over 10 years ago. No, just kidding. Yes, it was a long time ago. And thinking back, I think my career choice has definitely been very influenced by my mom and dad. They had an opportunity to leave communist China, and they went to Germany to study German. And they had a friend in Czech Republic who already had a business, and they joined him. And by us being in Eastern Europe, Berlin Wall fell, capitalist opportunities, he was able to basically change our family's destiny.
Okay, so funny thing is, I actually don't even know this story, so I'm super interested.
Really?
Yeah. Do you speak German?
I used to speak Czech. I used to be fluent in Czech because I went to like Czech public school. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I came to Canada 2001, but the reason why we were able to immigrate is because my dad was successful. My mom and dad were successful in their business. So then I saw like the risk that they took, how hard they work, and ultimately the reward and the impact that they had on their community, our family, my cousins, my grandparents, and so on.
If you don't mind me asking, what was their business?
It was in clothing import export. So they exported stuff, clothing from China and then sold it in the Czech Republic. It didn't always start there. They imported like canned mushrooms and like broccoli and like
Oh my God.
it wasn't successful. The first couple of containers, they lost money, and like my dad begged for like more credit basically to release the first containers of pajamas. And that took off, and he was able to pay off, the previous debts and so on and so forth. So like there were some sleepless nights for sure, as he retells it.
When we were in high school, my dad ventured the idea of because he was like already like semi-retired by then. He had the idea of importing. I want to say maybe it was like very early high school. It was such a long time ago before we had Korean alcohol in like Vancouver. He wanted to bring like soju, but it was like just so many hoops that he needed to jump through. There were so many regulations, so many distribution networks. Like just because the way that Korean companies operate, like you have to have like almost like a filial connection. Like they don't dole out those contracts very easily. But yeah, that's super interesting. But I mean, like your parents persisted, and my dad was like, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. They had to, right? That's the spirit of the entrepreneur. If they didn't persevere, they'd have to go back to China. So it's a matter of survival for them. So yeah, like I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, have a business. So it was more like I wanted to study anything that allowed me to be a better version of that. So, that sort of drove my decision to study business. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into accounting or finance, but in high school, I wanted to be in business. Well, yeah, yes and no. Like I've come to really appreciate the difference between a great accountant and a great finance person. They're actually two different types of people, which we can touch on later in my perspective.
So did you take I remember I think her name was Miss Stacy or what
Ah,
was her name?
yes.
Did you take the business class in high school?
Yes, yes. Yeah, she was awesome.
And then did you you went to I want to say UBC, right?
Yeah, I went to
NTUWC.
went to UBC, University of British Columbia, and I think I got some advice that, accounting is more of a hard skill in that, you get a designation, you get become a tax professional, and you sort of learn the language of business. And so that, one thing led to another. I wanted to pursue finance, but I guess it did just there was not the right opportunity. Coming out of university, there was a more set path to become a CPA. It was just more like defined. And then the finance career is less defined. And I just wasn't super comfortable at that moment to go that undefined route. So I chose something safer to start with, which is an accounting degree. It turned out, even though I enjoyed the knowledge, the fundamentals, I was not a good accountant. I was not a good accountant employee. I bored. I was bored out of my mind in my first couple jobs,
Did you do audit?
and I did audit. I did a bit of
Oh,
tax. I did small business audit. So I learned a ton. It was a really good learning experience, but I did not enjoy it. I left. So I was thinking about starting my business basically 6 months before I finished all my hours. I had like 6 months to plan out my business and do research and all that kind of stuff. So like the week that I finished all my CPA hours, I resigned and then started my own business. So I did, yeah.
that's so
It
funny.
was,
That's like going from someone that was like, oh, like I feel like this is kind of like risky going into finance. Like there's not really a set path, and then all of a sudden
I
be like, hey,
know.
I'm done with this. Like ready to move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
so
I wanted to give it a try. Like I wanted to test out what a career in accounting would be like, but because I had a little bit of FOMO. A lot of my friends went into accounting, so I was like, okay, maybe there's something there. There it wasn't. Not for me anyway.
and then so like after you were at you did auditing at PwC, right? Don't know Deloitte.
So yeah, it was a bit of a winding journey. So I got my designation at KPMG, and the minute I left, I started my own accounting firm as an entrepreneur, and it was primarily what we call client accounting services, basically bookkeeping, payroll, sales tax. I didn't do any year-end taxes, but I built a pretty unique business at that time, leveraging cloud technology. I was one of the first to adopt QuickBooks Online, a receipt bank, and Expensify, and so on and so forth. And I
Oh my
also
gosh,
changed
expense
the
if I can't believe that's a real business.
yeah.
If I everything if I.
Back then, yes. I changed up the business model of accounting. Before it was a kind of a once a year, like come see me, here's a bill kind of thing. But I changed it into a recurring revenue model, built ARR, and in 3.5 years we grew from 0 to 30 employees and I sold that business to Deloitte. That's how I ended up at Deloitte.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And when you first start your business, I guess like just um this is going to sound like a silly question, but I think it's probably interesting enough for people that are toying
Mhm.
with the idea of starting a business of their own. Where do you even start? Is it just like, oh, I'm going to start a business? Like back then, it's like, let's make a website. And then after that, do you like incorporate? And then do you have all these ideas and do you have investors? Or is it, I guess for accounting services, it's a little bit easier in the sense that it is a service and not a product. And the service is kind of what you put together in your mind. And you can produce that kind of digitally with a lot of, basically it's like you have an internet connection and you could build it
Yeah.
out with software. Whereas if you wanted to like manufacture some
Yeah.
sort of like electronic piece, like hardware, that'd be really challenging because you'd have to invest a lot of capital to,
Invest a lot.
yeah.
That's exactly it. With services business, it's a lot easier to get started because of the low upfront cost. But it's also harder to scale because you're literally selling your services, your time.
Yeah.
But I think before you spend any money, it has to, whatever you learn in business class, like create a business plan. Who are your customers? What's your pricing? What's your margins? Pro forma, 5-year forecast, what that's going to look like. Talk to some potential customers, understand their pain points. What's your unique selling point? Like so, like I said, I had about 6 months to build out that business plan. That's what I did. Studying, thinking, talking to people, pricing it out, market research, all that kind of stuff. It really does help.
And then, but how did you end up working for Deloitte after you sold the company? So you sold the company to Deloitte, and then was it that you like still kind of no longer owned, but you operated what you had sold to them?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Deloitte, they were looking for someone to run their client services, client accounting services division. So they, instead of starting something from scratch, they wanted to acquire a local leader. So that's what we were. We were running their BC division for client accounting for bookkeeping. Um, but there's the best of intentions, but reality is they are Deloitte. They're a big beast. They have processes that we just could not. Um, follow. We were who we were because we were nimble, because we did things a certain way. And although they promised us that everything would stay the same, they didn't. So it really felt like a death by a thousand cuts. So after about a year, I left. I actually left a lot of money on the table as well because it wasn't good for my mental health to stay. And then I left to start my next role, which was a head of finance at a tech startup locally called Traction Guest. They were a product that spun out of Traction on Demand. Very dynamic company. They raised Series A, and I joined post Series A. They were about 3 million in revenues when I joined. And 2.5 years later, they tripled and they sold to a private equity group for 9 figures. So it was really fun part of that journey.
So you have accomplished a lot in your life, both like professionally and personally from the side that I kind of know through being friends. You were very ambitious in your family life, and like I've only just started, but when did you have so much going on professionally, starting a business, selling a business, working for a Deloitte, big powerhouse company. Did you also grow your family at that time as well?
I did. Yeah. I got married, I think, fourth year of university before we graduated. So I graduated with a wife, which was
Oh my God, that's
kind of
wild.
that is wild. Do you know what? I credit a lot of what I've um, have done and will do to my partner Anne. I grew up as I'm an Asian kid, so I grew up with the mentality of like you got to get your life together before you can get married and so on. But my wife, she's Canadian. She's half German, half British, and their culture actually has a different mentality. Their perspective is no, no, no. We both have nothing right now. We know nothing right now. Let's come together now and build a life together. And so I was like, interesting. That makes sense too. So I talked to my parents, and they, we spent a lot of years in Czech Republic and Germany, and like they were very open to these Western ideas. They said, yeah, if you believe that's the right thing to do, you should do it. So then we got married at an early age, and we grew up together, which was like fantastic. There was 5 years. It was the two of us. Got to know each other, got to know sort of our habits, and then we started bringing a kid into that. And I think when I started Legacy Advantage, my first business, we were married. And then I think we had our kid about a year into running that business. I remember there was a unhappy client, and I was doing bookkeeping work while she was in the delivery room. Um, and I think I drank like 4 Red Bulls in like 24 hours. It was a very difficult labor, but like and the next day I had a meeting with another client like 8 a.m. and my wife was in the hospital. It was just like you do what you got to do. But yeah, that builds character. um yeah, and to be honest, like there's always someone better, there's always someone that's doing something different. I have friends from Sauder School of Business, UBC. They're in private equity a lot longer. They live in New York. They have a great lifestyle, and they just start having kids. And I'm like, oh man, if I had delayed having kids, could I have done something different or more? But I'm like, you know what? I have the life that I have right now, and I love it. God has blessed us with just what we need, not what we want, and that's beautiful.
And it's so funny you mentioned that because I have the same thing. So I think
Yeah.
all of my friends probably graduate. I mean, like Kristen and Vinny, a bunch of people,
Uh,
all graduated together with you in the same class.
yeah,
But then like my other friends, I don't know if you know her, Andrea. She might hear this
yeah.
podcast one day.
For
So
who?
Andrea, yeah, exactly. She and I had, so basically everyone has sons lately, and mine was born, I want to say, no, was Julian that much later? I want to say we had our sons like 4 months apart. And we always, I mean, I think the kind of opposite of you, where it's like, I wonder if I had children earlier, would I then have a more like runway that's continuous and unbroken to have like a fruitful career without any major interruptions earlier on. So it's interesting to see how we have different perspectives like that. But I think also the best part is to, like you said, we have what we need, like not necessarily exactly what we want, but we have what we need. And with
Yeah.
the whole like going into private equity, doing that for like years and years, like for me, I did investment banking for 3 years and I was like, like I think that's like, I'm pretty sure like this is not it for me. I have like moments where I'm like, I wish I did that longer. Okay. Like I wish I opened up that door that a little bit further. But at the same time, it's like, I wouldn't be here doing what I do and sitting with you if that weren't the case.
Yep. You can't look back. You have to appreciate, the past and move
And
on.
honestly, like as an entrepreneur, you probably had so much more like mental maturity at a young age by having a young family than someone that had worked several years at a private equity firm, I think really ever would. Because like private equity, I mean, it's a pretty tough grind. There's a lot of kind of like grunt work hours. It's a little bit different now with Chat GPT and all these things that have
Yeah.
developed, but it's just like a long, long time of putting in a lot of late nights, hard work and labor. It kind of feels thankless. And then eventually you try, and then you get the opportunity to work even harder, right? Like you work for the opportunity to work for the
Yeah.
opportunity to work really hard.
Yeah.
But I find that the most poignant thing that I find is whenever I find people that have children and families earlier on, they develop this like level-headedness that just no matter how many years of tough working experience you have, that you will not gain with it's just that there's like a different level of mental maturity for someone that has a family,
I,
especially at
I
a young
think
age.
the mental maturity, I think that's certainly a part of it, but it's also like this perspective. Um, we can skip forward a bit, but just recently I started my business again. Now it's called TF Advisors. And then my wife and I actually just bought a business. So we're actually operating two small businesses at
Oh,
the
you're
same
doing
time.
another one?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about the other one too.
Yeah. The one I'm running right now is a fractional CFO business, basically providing, CFO services, M&A advisory to small business. And then my wife, she's running a tutoring business, an education business that has 80 employees and 700 students that we're serving in every single month. And like things come up and people complain and payroll's wrong. Like had I been younger, I would have been like I would have freaked out. But now it's like, oh sure, like okay, yeah, sorry, I underpaid you by $60. I'll wire it to you. Like it's just like okay, fewer things phase me now
Yeah.
because maybe that my identity doesn't tie is not tied to my job as much, and I freaked out enough to know what's the freak out situation, what is just like
The
just do it,
barometer is so much higher now.
Yeah, yeah.
How was the fractional CEO work versus owning and operating your own company? How did you get into the work of being a fractional CFO? Because I see that it's picking
Yeah,
up more and more popularity, especially in like North
yeah.
America.
Yeah, so I skipped a few steps. I think the key to fractional whatever is you got to have an angle. You got to have something unique, and your customers then choose fractional whatever based on their needs. So after I left Deloitte, after the company that I was working for got acquired by private equity, I got my MBA at UC Berkeley, and I got an opportunity to work in private equity as a principal for a couple of years. I saw a lot of deals. I was part of deal teams that bought company, did diligence negotiations. Learned a lot of skills. in that role. And I think that the value that I want to bring through TF Advisors is bringing that M&A perspective to small business. I've been an operator, so I can relate to entrepreneurs on what's it like to run a business. But I also know what the cheat sheet, the answer key is, because I was on the private equity side, so I know what things drive value, what we look for, versus this doesn't drive value, or like, no, this is going to destroy value. So helping to bring that perspective to the lower market, I think, is valuable. Also, so many entrepreneurs, they want to grow through acquisition, but M&A just seems so nebulous and difficult, and like you can make a big mistake just by just missing a few things. And so I'm actually working with several entrepreneurs that want to quote unquote 10x their business in the next 5 to 7 years, and the only way to achieve those numbers is M&A. Like
That's true,
M&A
yeah.
has to be part of their playbook. It can't just all be around. Like you have to have a corporate development function. And they can't afford a full-time role, and so
Mhm.
I come in as a fractional executive on their team, driving their M&A effort to achieve the numbers that they need to achieve.
And for when you did your MBA, did you do it because there's various reasons people do an MBA. For me, like I kind of thought, okay, like I did the investment banking thing for a bit. I left. It's like, did I really want to leave, or like, do I want to go and live potentially in the UK, London, or New York? Well, it'd be certainly easier to go and like take some time, build my network, spend a bunch of money, and then be able to like infiltrate and get a student visa at a great MBA program. But lots of people kind of save it for a part of like, I want to switch careers. Or if there are some people that want to like further develop their career, but I see I think the most common thing I see is people using it as a card to, I want to pivot my career path. How did you use it? And did you find what you got out of it, what you wanted going into it?
Yeah, I found something better. I think I found a lot of things going into the MBA. I thought I wanted to be like a traditional CFO. I wanted to advance my career because I was the head of finance already, basically functioning as a CFO role. I wanted to use that opportunity to network into a CFO position. And then in that process, I discovered the idea of search funds or entrepreneurship through acquisition. And I was like, you know what? That's it. That's actually what I want. And so I wanted one thing going in, but I discovered something else that was a much better fit to who I am. So much so that like I had an opportunity to be a CFO of a tech company. I was in the final stages. I was invited to a board meeting, and like I felt viscerally sick. Like I just didn't want to go to that interview. Like I don't want that job, even if it paid well. I have to honor my call of running my own ship. Um, and that's what I did. But the search fund, the ETA, the mentality is there is I didn't really have a business idea I want to pursue. But if you buy a business that's already running, that already has customers, already has a business plan, then you as an MBA, as a professional executive, you can go in there and professionalize things and take the right risks and grow a business that's already there, right? That's the intention. That's why we bought a business.
And so tell me about what you're doing today, and tell me more about TF Advisors, and do you like golf?
Yeah. Yeah, I do like golf. Not as much as I don't play as much as I like to. But the brand name TF Advisors is really a culmination of combining the three letters of my kids' names. My kids' names are Elizabeth, Eleanor, and Theodore. So I'm like EET.
Oh, that's
T
so
T is nice, but like T what? Like
Oh, what
so
a wonderful way to kind of like immortalize that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and then tee up, and so the tagline of our company is tee up the next generation. So we're here to tee up my clients' next state valuation, whatever that may be. So that's the intention, and that's 50% of what I do, and then the other half, I'm helping my wife run the tutoring business.
And does Anne also have a business degree?
She does not. And so I think it'd be fun to get her on the podcast here as well. She can talk about how, she feels like an imposter every day and like, we're managing it together. And she's doing such a fantastic job. Like she's the heart of the business and I'm the head. Um, there are times where I'm like, hey, the data is saying we're not doing good enough. And she's like, Bob, chill out. Like we're doing fine. Like we've only been here for 2 months. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right.
And wait, so you've been in California longer than 2 months now, right?
Yeah, I've been in California since July of last year.
And for T Up, now, where do you see the company going in the next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't want it to be a really, really big thing. I ran the big thing before. I grew a company from 0 to 30 employees, and I don't feel like I want to do that again. I want to keep it small. I want to keep it, high margin. Um, and I want to be involved with fewer clients, but at a deeper level. I think as I've grown older, I appreciate relationships a lot more. So I want to be much more relational with my clients this go around. Whereas, previous company, it was very much a transactional, like, hey, you pay me money, I do your bookkeeping kind of deal. Um, it feels much more honest this time, like honest to who I am.
And just for our listeners who aspire to be entrepreneurs one day, what do you think are kind of like the top skills that you found have been most instrumental to your success?
Um,
Because we have a lot of people, like, so for example, the end all and be all of working in finance is Excel. And so like we know that like being able to command the Excel language is like without question something that you need. Having presentation skills is without question something that you need. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable getting in front of people, talking to people you don't know, building meaningful relationships. But apart from the things that are more obvious, in your experience of growing companies, selling companies, being on the PE side, what do you think are kind of like the most important skills that you've developed in your professional career so far that you'd say, like, this has kind of made me who I am and successful to date?
yeah, I, there's so many, but I think the key one is leadership skills. Leading yourself, leading your team, uh, learning how to communicate. It's that because being an entrepreneur, you're going to be leading a team, and they're relying on you to lead and lead them well. Um, and it's a skill. You don't have to be a natural leader to be a good leader. You can learn it by reading books, by practicing, by getting feedback. So that's probably an undertaught class at school, but one of the most important skills as an entrepreneur.
And I find that like it's meaningful that you picked leadership as the one's key skill, because I find that's the most relatable to everyday life, right? It's like you develop as a leader, but as you develop as a leader, you're developing as a person. You're understanding generally the people that either work for me or that I work with. How am I demonstrating what like I want this company to be founded on? And you get to experience all sorts of scenarios where there's tons of adversity and like unpredictable things where it kind of, raises the bar for like the panic situations. And so it's one of those things I think is very like you said, undertaught. It's like the more that you get experience in leadership roles and also just being like under different leaders, you get to learn more and more about yourself. And then it just becomes like a journey of self-improvement throughout your life.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, okay, so what I love to always like close out our podcast on is, especially for someone that has gone through so much like change in your career where you start off on like a traditional path where there's this exam, you go to the auditing firm, you do this, and then you all of a sudden realize like, I want to do different things. And you clearly have almost like a conviction, right? Remember when you went to like the boardroom in the interview and you're like, yeah, I like don't want to do this. I definitely want to be the leader of my own ship. For someone that has such a strong sight on what they want to do, if you could give a piece of like, anecdotal advice to anyone that's listening out there, regardless of what stage they are in their careers, what would it be?
Yeah, I I think the number one key to happiness and success is figure out who you are and stick with it. Um, Sticking with it. I think there's a saying, people are really great decision makers, but they're not really good at decision keepers. Um, like we change our minds too often. I've had friends who started with me at KPMG and they're now partners. Like, holy moly, you know, and they're making bank. They're leading their divisions, and I'm here running a little company. Like, and they stuck with it. They follow the principle of compound interest in their careers, but that's who they are, and they love being part of a big brand and big ship, and that they're thriving. And whereas I would have wilted in that same environment, right? So their career has been like, just compound income. My career is like grew, like grew. And I love it. But that brings me joy. And if you ask them to start a business, like they probably would have a very difficult time. So I think for young future leaders, future finance, accounting, career folks, just like in your 20s, try as many roles as you can. Just try. Fail, take as many different jobs as you can, and then figure out what you like and don't like, and then stick with it.
I feel like this has been one of the most like wisdom filled podcasts. And I know that we're going to have lots of people commenting that they've loved this one so much. I've enjoyed being part of this so much. And I am so excited for everyone to hear this. And so, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining in. And I think we'll have to close it out on that note because I can't think of anything better to close it out on.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, happy to come on back again and dive deeper if there's more interest. So good to always see you again, Neon. Good to reconnect.
And so everyone listening, we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. FinPod is brought to you by Corporate Finance Institute, the #1 rated online provider of finance and banking training, certifications, and productivity tools.